Alrighty, guys, and welcome to this week's episode of But Why. This is week number 3, and today I'm making changes to this little podcast I'm doing every week. Today, you can see it right below me. I have some gameplay playing, so you guys have something to watch other than just me. If you would prefer it was just me showing, like you prefer, like I was just like in the full screen, let me know. But like, let me know if you also like just like the gameplay down there. But regardless. What we are getting into today is we're just going to be talking about Dark Souls 3. I don't think this episode will be nearly as long as the other ones because all we're going to be talking about in this episode is just the bosses. I do have a video already up on the channel about me talking about all the bosses, but that was written in a script, and I do not have a script written for this. So this is all just off the top of my head. I'm going to go over the bosses. I'm not ranking any sort of them. I'm just going to give my thoughts and ideas about all the bosses in Dark Souls 3, including the DLCs, and as well as some mini bosses that I think are worth mentioning. And starting with Udex Gundyr, I'm going to talk a bit about the lore of the bosses, at least in the way that I understand them, and just like my experience with like how difficult they are, like if I think they're cool or not. But getting into Gundyr, Gundyr is the tutorial boss. It's one of the I would say it's a good tutorial boss because FromSoft shows you right out the gate that they mean business. Like when he goes into phase 2, it lets you know that this game is unexpected. Like that you should always like be prepared for something that I guess you won't see coming. Because when he goes into phase 2, he gets like the pus of man or whatever. But if you didn't know, this boss is weak to fire, at least in the second state. He's not too difficult of a boss. Apparently, he's a pretty big roadblock to players that do not play many Souls games. But I will say more about Gundyr when we get to the champion variation. Moving on to Vort of the Boreal Valley. This is the soundtrack that you always hear in memes. It's iconic. It's been memed. I think Vort is a pretty dang cool boss because the lore of the Outrider Knights from the Boreal Valley is just cool in general. I don't know what their main goal is and whatnot, but like he's like the Outrider Knight, even though I would argue he's not near as hard as the regular Outrider Knights, because all you gotta do is sit under him and spam R1. I honestly don't have too much to say about Vort. Like that's basically it. He's a cool boss. I like him. Bit on the easy side. But moving on from him, we have in my opinion the worst boss in the game, which is the Cursed Rotted Greatwood. Now I passionately hate this boss because I don't have a good reason to, other than I know there's lore behind him. I just don't know it, and I don't care to look it up either because it's a nasty boss. It's just a tree with pus-filled sacks with an arm sticking out of it, and he oozes all over you. It's just not a good time. Don't like him. Probably my worst favorite boss in the game. Difficulty is not hard once you know where all the weak spots are on it. Moving on to the ye old Crystal Sage. I actually think Crystal Sage is... I like Crystal Sage. I like the design of them. Him, them, she. I've always called the Crystal Sage a she, but I think a sage refers to a guy, but it could be gender neutral, so do not... But it's a bit of a gimmick fight. Oh my gosh, I almost killed Melania there. How did I not? I'm gonna take that L. Hard L. I like the design of the sages, but the fight itself is a bit of a gimmick fight. You can parry them. Like the first stage is nothing to brag about. Second stage, however, they spawn multiple crystal sages. The blue magic ones are the fake ones. They die in one hit. A good strategy to get rid of them is to just throw throwing knives at them, or just literally just punch them. And then the real sage is the purple one. Overall, I like crystal sages, but not too much to say about them other than that. Oh boy, we have up next the Abyss Watchers. Now, if you know me, I love this boss. And as you can see right over there, I have 3 little minifigures of the Abyss Watchers. I forget exactly what company I got them from, but they're super cool. and they're all doing the iconic poses. I have a lot to say about the Abyss Watchers because I'm a huge fan of Artorias, and in the lore, the Abyss Watchers are connected to Artorias because Artorias delved into the abyss and fought the creatures within. The Abyss Watchers did the same thing after his passing, and they basically just carry on his legacy. They're the first Lord of Cinder you fight, and they're the only, in a special case, they're one of two Lords of Cinder that have a cutscene. The other one being the Lothric and Lorien. But I guess you can kind of count Eorm if you do Sigurd's questline. But that's if you do the questline. But I'm not going to count it. Well, I guess I could count it, but it's not something you would get in a normal playthrough. But that's what makes them special to me. Another thing that makes them special to me is that they're the only boss that I'm aware of that you actually get help from the boss itself in the fight. Because you fight the first Abyss Watcher. Once you get it down to a certain amount of health, a second Abyss Watcher comes. And then once you get the health bar a little bit farther down, you'll get this third Abyss Watcher with red eyes. It doesn't necessarily fight with you, it's just fighting the other Abyss Watchers. Like, if you accidentally hit that Abyss Watcher with red eyes, it'll aggro onto you. It's just kind of like a neutral Abyss Watcher. But it just fights whatever it aggro's onto first. But once you're done with that stage, you have the second stage. And I had a rule for the longest time that I couldn't skip that cutscene, because I just thought it was an amazing cutscene. It's just so cool. It's iconic in my opinion. I haven't even mentioned the soundtrack yet. The soundtrack is probably the best soundtrack in, I don't know if I want to say all of Souls, but it's pretty up there. Like, I would put it under Plin Plin Plon or Gwyn's theme, but it's definitely up there, and it freaking great job on FromSoft's music team, because it is outstanding. If you haven't heard the Abyss Watchers OST, just go ahead and look it up and just have it playing in the background. Once you're in the second stage of the fight, the boss has fire moves, and the way the Abyss Watchers like fighting style is with like flames, it just looks so cool. Like, I'll draw out the fight just so I could bait out this one super cool attack that they have, where they'll leap at you kind of like a wolf, and they'll slash. They'll put their dagger in the ground. They'll swing themselves in a 360, and then they'll do like a front flip and slam. I'll try to bait that out on purpose just because I think it looks so cool. Only downside of this boss is that it has a bit of a lower health pool. He's on your butt the whole time. Like, if you can't really heal without him dashing up on you. Nevertheless, though, difficulty is pretty dang high. Probably the first actual roadblock of the game. I can see people getting stuck at Vork, but I can see people getting stuck on Abyss Watchers like for an hour, quitting the game, and then coming on the next day and beating them. But I think I've talked about Abyss Watchers enough. You guys know I like them. Moving on to Deacons of the Deep. I believe Deacons of the Deep are like my third worst favorite. Like, it goes Curse Rod Grave is the worst, then it goes Ancient Wyvern, and then probably Deacons of the Deep. It's a puzzle fight. You fight the Deacon that's glowing red until eventually the actual priest spawns. And then fatties have force, they heal him. But if you know what you're doing, you can just stun lock the priest into just killing him. But sometimes you get like uber unlucky, and the fat priests just spam force, and you get knocked down. And then they'll heal, and then they'll start casting their curse spell. And sometimes it can be annoying, and it's especially hard on soul level 1 as well. But I don't know too much on the lore of the Deacons of the Deep, other than they're connected to Aldrich in one way or another. But not too much to say about the Deacons. But moving on to Mr. High Lord Wolnir. Now, I like Wolnir as a boss. Like, I think his design is super cool, and I think his lore is also pretty cool as well. Him being with, like, the King of Karthus and stuff like that. And, you know, Karthus was supposedly this unstoppable empire of these warriors that were like similar to Spartans, I guess is the best way to put it, where they're just like warriors from birth. I think I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I remember researching. But no, he's super cool. His fight could be a bit better because he's another gimmick fight, one after another, right after the deacons. You got to hit his bracelets. Once his bracelets are exploded, he's basically dead. He does have a unique kill animation or a unique death animation though. If he does die without the bracelets, which I've never actually gotten myself before, so I might have to try that out one day. Other than that, he's not a very difficult boss. Never have problems with him. I have like 900 hours in this game, so no boss is really hard for me, but I will be sure to mention what bosses do give me a little bit of trouble. Moving on to Old Demon King. I think even including the DLC bosses, the Old Demon King is like my least fought boss. Like I think I fought every DLC boss more than I fought Old Demon King. Mostly because there's no ultimate reward for beating him, and he's a boring fight that is just similar to the other fire demons in the game. Like I'd honestly rather fight them than the Old Demon King, because the Old Demon King spams like fire projectiles, and it's kind of just eh. So pretty cool, like Easter egg though, is if you get him down to like 10% health and then let him do his explode attack. After that explode attack, he can't actually do anything. He'll just kind of like start swiping at you away, and like he's like that explosion was his oh my gosh, I need to stop saying like it was his last like effort of like trying to he exposes all his or he expends all his strength and as a last ditch effort to kill you, and then he has like no more power left. So pretty cool Easter egg there. Oh boy, this is a heavy hitter as well. Pontiff Suleiman, such a cool boss. I know the lore on him is super cool. I would do a terrible job of explaining it, so I would look up, like, I believe Vati's video on Pontiff is just one of his Dark Souls, the lore of Dark Souls 3 videos. He didn't like make like a individual video for Pontiff or anything, so you have to look up like his videos called, I think it's like the lore of the bosses on Dark Souls 3. His lore is super cool. Like he came like as a tyrant and like basically appointed himself the ruler of the Boreal Valley. Like I said, I'm gonna butcher the lore, which is why I'm telling you to go watch Bachi's video. He is so cool in design wise as well as moveset wise. His boss arena is super cool. His OST is amazing. It's just super cool. You can parry him, and it feels super satisfying to get those parries off. When you get to the second stage, he's got that ghost that tells you what he's doing next. It's super cool. Definitely up there, and one of the more difficult, and definitely high on my list of coolest bosses in the game. Moving on, we got Yorm the Giant. Super cool design, one of my more favorite OSTs in the game. His lore is absolutely amazing. He's one of the Lords of Cinder. His connection to Siegward is a bit of a sad story. Just watch that whole like Vati lore of the bosses video. Like you need to learn the story of all these guys, because it is amazing. But sadly, his gameplay wise, he's one of the easier bosses in the game because he's a gimmick fight where you use a certain weapon to beat him with the Storm Ruler, which is actually a callback to Demon Souls when you fight the Storm King, which is actually adding to the theory that all the Dark Souls games, even including Bloodborne and Elden Ring, are all just in the same universe. Because the Claymore is in Elden Ring, as well as a chest. It's just straight up the chest from the Dark Souls series. There's one in Elden Ring. It's in Atlas Plateau. Like as soon as you get there, it's in one of the ruins. I have beaten Yorm without the Storm Ruler, and it is difficult. The burning parts on his arms, and I believe there's like a burning part on his leg that take more damage, but he still has like the highest like defense for any enemy in the game, I believe, because I'm looking literally on the wiki right now. It says he's strong against physical attack and weak to lightning and Storm Ruler. So he's resistant to every type of physical damage, which is a bit ridiculous. So the fight takes forever when it's not using the Storm Ruler. Moving on to Aldrich. I don't have too much of an opinion on Aldrich. Like, I think he's a cool boss, and he's definitely a cool Lord of Cinder. His lore is definitely cool, but he's kind of just there for me.
Like his OST is his second stage is annoying because he's constantly firing spells at you. He's not any sort of difficulty for me because I can usually just breeze through him on my first try. That's why I'm saying he's kind of just there. A bit of a tip on him, if you didn't notice, is that he's got that tail thing where it's just like that big mush. He takes less damage on that, whereas if you hit his actual body, he takes more damage. I didn't know that for the longest time, but now I do. Moving on from Aldrich, right after Aldrich, or Yorm, actually, you get teleported to the Dancer of the Boreal Valley. And I believe to this day, I die most to the Dancer of the Boreal Valley. Like, I don't really die to any boss in this game, but if I did have to pick, like, one boss that, like, I would have the highest risk of dying, it's definitely the Dancer. I believe Dancer was, like, the second or third hardest boss for my, Soul Level 1 playthrough, because she hits so many times, and there's such a high risk to die to, like, a boss that moves so fast in his kind of, like, mid-late game, where she's just rough, and, like, the OST makes, like, the boss fight so uneasy and unnerving, along with her slow movements, and then when she's attacking and, like, the breathing. FromSoft really knows how to set, like, an atmosphere when it comes to their games. Okay, moving on to Dragon Slayer armor. I always call this Dragon Slayer armor Ornstein. I'm not sure if it is Ornstein at this point, but I'm also not sure if it's an actual person in there, because the boss is called Dragon Slayer armor, not the Dragon Slayer. So it's literally just an armor being controlled by the pilgrim butterflies that are shooting stuff at you during the boss fight, and it's just like it's cool. But I also had a comment on one of my YouTube videos about how I usually play with the game with, like, blood off for whatever reason. I just don't turn it on. Someone commented on my boss ranking YouTube video that you hit him and he bleeds, which means there is someone in there and that it's not an armor. So I don't know at this point, but I like to think it's pretty cool if it's an armor being controlled by the butterflies and not an actual person in there. But it also would be cool if, like, it was Ornstein in there. Although I don't know if it would make much sense, but it is cool that they once again found a way to put Ornstein in one of the Dark Souls games. Osiris, I think Osiris is, like, such a cool fight, and if you didn't know, the cut content for this boss is brutal. Like, in the cut content, there's, like, brutal sounds of him killing Ocelot before he goes second stage. Like, it's brutal. Like, I recommend looking it up, but at the same time, be warned that it is, like, kind of disturbing. If you're like me, and a lot of people like Dark Souls games, you will probably like Berserk as well. Berserk is very unnerving. It's dark fantasy, and it's dark storytelling with, like, just disturbing things. But some of us twisted people enjoy that sort of thing. But, you know, Osiris is, I would say, I think Osiris was like, it's probably the first or the second hardest for my Soul Level 1 playthrough. Because he's got that instant death charge where it's got, like, no, like, startup, or, like, it's not telegraphed at all. He just charges and it's an active hitbox and you're dead. So I had to go to Reddit and ask people how they're beating Osiris at Soul Level 1. And I was recommended a shield, which actually did help. It broke my guard every single time, but it did keep me from dying. So if you're struggling with Osiris on a Soul Level 1, just use a shield and be blocking whenever you're not attacking. But other than that, don't really have too many problems with him. The lore on him is cool because he is the king of Lothric, and his lore is something along the lines of he's experimented on the guys in the profane capital that are, like, kind of dragon people, where I guess eventually he experimented on himself too and kind of turned himself into that naked dragon with no scales. It seems like he made the best progress with himself rather than the experiments on the dragons in profane capital. I hope you're enjoying watching me die to Melania over and over again, by the way. It's great. It took me 5 hours. If you want to, like, I don't know why you would, but I did upload all 5 hours of my attempts to my White Willow 2 channel. So if you want to be crazy and watch that, go ahead, I dare you. And moving on to Champion Gundyr. Champion Gundyr is so freaking cool. It's a shame that he is so easy to parry. It's not even funny. If you like intentionally go into this fight handicapping yourself by not parrying, he is one of the hardest bosses in the game because he will not let you heal. Because if you even get any sort of distance against him, he will do that charging lunge, like jump attack. And it's just so hard to get away from him. He's a joke if you have a shield, but if you don't parry, he is definitely one of the hardest in the game. And if you didn't know Gundyr's lore, he was supposed to be the next Lord of Cinder. But when he showed up to Firelink Shrine, there was no Firekeeper there for him. So he couldn't become the Ashen One, or the Lord of Cinder that to light the flame, because they didn't have a Firekeeper for him there. So he eventually like just went outside of Firelink Shrine testing Ashen Ones to see if they were worthy, and he waited like I believe hundreds of years for you to eventually arrive and test your strength to see if you are fit to link the flame. At least that's my way of interpreting it. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate. Okay, moving on to Lothric and Lorien. I think this is one of the funnest bosses in the game. It took me so long to get down how to actually fight them, but the teleports are so fun to freaking dodge out of. The OST for them is like some of the coolest in the game. Their lore isn't too complicated. Lorien's is pretty cool because he fought the demon of hate, or the demon of hatred, and the demon of sorrow, I think is the other one. And his sword is literally like part of them, or it's from them. The lore behind Lothric is that he was supposed to be the next Lord of Cinder. He doesn't want to light the flame, so we need to come kill him and get their strength so we're able to link the flame. He's choosing not to. We try to make him. He's like, nah, I ain't gonna do that, fam. So we kill him and get their strength. That is it for, I think, all the main game bosses, except for Ancient Wyvern. Not main game, like required bosses, even though Champion Gundyr isn't required. So I don't know why it's ordered like this, but Ancient Wyvern, probably the second easiest boss in the game, because all you do is jump on the Ancient Wyvern's head and they just die. You just run through the area and then do a plunging attack, and it's dead. I don't have anything to say about it. It's just a regular giant dragon, and you plunge attack on it. It's pretty cool for like 3 seconds, but then you move on, and you're like, oh, gotta fight Nameless King next. Which Nameless King is one of the coolest boss fights in the game. People always had like major problems with Nameless King, and I never really have. Like the Storm Drake was never really a huge issue for me. Nameless King himself is, however, very, very difficult because he's a very Elden Ring-like boss where he delays tons of his attacks, and it's just sometimes difficult to realize when he's actually going to attack us. He'll like delay it and then do it really quick, and then he'll delay it and then he'll do it. But you know, he's super cool, and his lore is amazing as well. Like he's the forgotten son of Gwyn because he abandoned Anor Londo and Gwyn to side with the dragons, which in the lore, Gwyn is fighting the dragons. He's trying to make them go extinct. The Nameless King abandoned them and went to join them. And I think it's a super cool backstory because it doesn't outright tell you ever in the game that Nameless King is the son of Gwyn. But through like item descriptions and just like statues from Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 kind of just like hints at it, but now it's pretty much generally accepted in the community that Nameless King is indeed Gwyn's son. And then as our last main game boss that we were discussing, we're going to talk about Soul of Cinder, who is one of the coolest ideas of a boss like ever. It takes elements from every single Dark Souls game. Like there's elements of Gwyn in his moveset. There's elements of every like the protagonist from Dark Souls 1, the protagonist from Dark Souls 2, and even the protagonist from Dark Souls 3. This boss probably has the most broad moveset out of any boss, like, I want to say in the series, because he has like 5, I believe it's like 4 different weapons you can choose from. It's like the curved sword, the lance, the straight sword, and the great sword. And then I guess you can count the second stage as the great sword as well, which is a 5th one. I wish I could say Soul of Cinder was like a harder boss for me. He's definitely difficult at soul level 1. because it's such an endurance fight, and you have to be perfect for so long, since like he has one of the bigger health bars in the game, and he can mix up his moves a lot. Like he mixes up his moves a lot because he acts like he's gonna do one attack and then he'll like switch it up. He's kind of like Genichiro from Sekiro. And then in the second stage, you get elements of Gwyn's soundtrack, which is the plin plin plon. People really enjoyed that. I said this video wasn't going to be as long as the other ones, but I guess I can just ramble about this game on forever. We're like, I'm half an hour into recording it, and I don't think I'm going to have to edit out too much of what I got going on here. But getting into the DLCs, we're going to talk about the Ashes of Ariandel first, because there's not too much to say about the Champion's Gravetender. People give that boss a bad rap, but like, I think they're pretty cool. Like, it is a bit of a lazy boss because it's just an NPC with the wolf that you fight in the DLC itself. It's not in the boss fight, because you kill the NPC pretty quickly. If you don't kill the NPC pretty quickly, it's annoying to fight them both at the same time, so you want to get rid of the NPC quick. And then I personally love the fighting the wolf, as well as the soundtrack in the fight. It's just super epic, and I love the effects of the frost effects that the wolf has as well. But that's basically all I gotta say about Champions of Gravetender. So we can move on to Sister Freda, who is probably my third favorite boss in the game, which is ridiculous because I love Freda, and I wish I could put her at number 2, but that takes the spot. Or that spot is taken by another boss that we're going to talk about later. When I was first fighting Freda, it was so difficult, man. It took me so long to beat just the first stage. It took me a little bit longer to beat the second stage. And I was so happy when I beat the second stage, because obviously the game tricks you into thinking the boss fight is done. Until lo and behold, Freda gets up again, and bada bing, bada boom, there's a stage 3 on an already hard boss. And the effects for the Black Flames on Black Flame Freda is so freaking cool. I've mentioned this before, but Black Flame Freda has more of like a moveset from Bloodborne than from Dark Souls. So you're fighting a Bloodborne boss with Dark Souls mechanics is the best way I can describe it. But it is just epic all the way through, and it's always intense whenever I'm in that last stage, just fighting her. Moving on to the Demon of Hatred and Sorrow, as well as the is it called the Demon King? I don't even remember like what the Demon Prince, that's what it is, not the Demon King. I personally go for the Meteor one every time, and I don't know which one you have to kill to actually get it. It's the I believe it's the darker red demon I kill first, not the brighter orange. But supposedly people say the laser is easier to dodge than the meteors, but I've always just found it doesn't really matter, but I usually go for the meteor one. The Demon Prince is from Lothric's lore, not Lothric, Lorien's lore. He killed them both in his lore, and it's just so cool to see that you fight two bosses that in their lore have also fought each other. Next up from the Ringed City DLC, I forgot to mention these are from the Ringed City DLC. Next up is Half-Light. This is a PvP boss, but when you're not on PvP, it is Half-Light, Spear of the Church. It's an NPC that wields the Frayed Blade, which this boss can be scary, but you can cheese it. It's still level 1 by just charging R2s with the Historic Greatsword. Not too much to say about Half-Light. It's just a PvP fight for the most part. And moving on to Dark Eater Midir, probably the best dragon fight ever in a Dark Souls game. Like even including Elden Ring. Like I think Farnasax or Farnaset, I forget what their names are, and then Paludusidex. You know what ones I'm talking about from Elden Ring. Paludusidex or however you pronounce his name gets close to Midir, but I think Midir will always take the cake. Because his boss room is so cool. His OST is so cool. Surprisingly, he is an easy fight if you know what you're doing against him, but it takes a long time to recognize all of his animations, if that makes sense. Super cool boss fight. Probably like my 4th favorite boss in the game if I had to pick. And then getting on to my 2nd favorite boss in the game, we have Slave Knight Gale. Slave Knight Gale is so freaking cool, and he's probably got my favorite boss room out of any boss in Dark Souls 3. Huge fan of it. His OST is absolutely iconic. The reveal of the final boss of the entire Dark Souls series being Slave Knight Gale. Like, he transports you to the Painted World, and he's like on the search for the Dark Soul, so he can give it to the painter so she can create a new world. Like it's just super cool to all think about and just to see how it all eventually comes together in the end when no one really saw it coming. But in the second stage, he becomes hollow actually, so the Hollow Slayer Greatsword actually does more damage against him. His cape mechanic is so cool that like you have to dodge his sword, but at the same time you gotta dodge his sword in a way that you won't get hit by the cape as well. Because in Soul Level 1, the cape will one-shot you, I believe. His moveset is so freaking cool, and it's very anime. I know that's like not a comparison that people want to hear, but it's just very anime, and that's the best way I can put it. I think we've talked about everything. The only thing I wanted to mention about mini bosses was the paired Ultra Greatsword Ringed Knight. I consider that knight to be more difficult than Half Light themselves, and he's just so cool because he has that move set, and he's just such a bad A. But I think that's gonna do it. I just got wrecked by Melania. That's hilarious, right? By the way, if you haven't seen that video of me beating Melania, I recommend checking it out because it's one of my more favorite videos that I've made this year so far. But nevertheless, that is gonna do it for this week's episode of But Why. Again, let me know how I'm doing in this little series. If I'm doing good talking to myself, let me know how you feel about the gameplay being below me, or if you'd rather just have it be a full screen. Let me know. I want to make this little podcast the best I can, and give me ideas on things you would like me to talk about. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.